What really happened in 1970s Jamaica is a story the government has tried to erase from history. The secret behind Bob Marley's attempted silencing is more shocking than anyone admits. The real reason the music became a weapon is a truth you will only learn if you watch until the very end. Bob Marley walked back into the light carrying wounds that should have silenced him. And yet the moment his voice returned to the microphone, the island understood that the bullet did not break him. It baptized him. The unaliving attempt did not create fear. It confirmed the truth of everything he had been saying. The shot that was meant to remove him instead stripped hesitation from his presence. He stepped on stage days later, not healed, not triumphant in the easy sense, but transformed into something the government, the life-takers, and the outside world had not calculated. A man who no longer believed he could die before his work was done. The rhythm behind him was not just rhythm, it was heartbeat. It was announcement. It was declaration that music had crossed into prophecy. The band struck chords that felt like iron gates swinging open. The crowd did not cheer as if attending entertainment. They chanted like participants in a cosmic unveiling. This was not a musician performing. This was a messenger resuming transmission. The city felt it. The hills felt it. The slums felt it. Trenchtown boys who grew up with cracked heels and hands, hardened by survival, heard something familiar in that defiance. The refusal to bow. Political tension thickened the air as closely as humidity. The streets were carved into zones of allegiance. Color-coded flags painted on corrugated zinc. Neighborhoods told to choose sides. Marley did not choose sides. Marley chose the people. The people were larger than party. The people were older than politics. The people were the pulse of the land itself. And while Bob Marley raised his voice beneath the weight of wounds, Augustus Pablo was elsewhere bending time into sound. The melodica in his hands carried a cry that felt like ancient lamentations, rising through whichever speaker could bear the vibration. The instrument was not supposed to lead. It was supposed to decorate. Pablo did not accept that. What was dismissed as a toy became a ritual horn of summons in his hands. When his records rolled through the sound system yards, men who had suffered too much to speak easily found themselves silenced into reverence. His dub meditations were like stepping into a temple with no priest, where the only scripture was bassline and echo trail. It was the kind of music that made listeners close their eyes even in the middle of a crowd. Kingston had its own acoustic philosophy. The louder the speaker, the clearer the truth. Nothing whispered, nothing shy, nothing disguised. Even love songs had backbone. The sound system towers rose like monuments constructed by people who had no land deeds but claimed territory through frequency. Dance hall lawns were the great auditoriums of the poor, the academy of street-schooled intellect, where selectors rearranged pride, memory, grief, and joy with a single drop of needle on vinyl. A record could start a fight. A record could end a feud. A record could declare independence more effectively than any politician's speech. In the midst of these vibrations, Dennis Emmanuel Brown was the heartbeat of tenderness that did not surrender to hardness. He was young, unbelievably young, with a voice that felt ancestral. His love songs were not escapism. They were the garden planted inside the prison yard. He sang with velvet resilience, the kind that carried no fragility. His tone said, "Even the oppressed have the right to sweetness. Even warriors need to be held." His songs did not deny pain, they answered it. And because he was called the Crown Prince of Reggae, people sometimes forgot that crowns in this music were granted by the streets, not ceremonies, not industry committees. The people crowned him, because when Dennis Brown sang, they felt themselves restored to humanity instead of reduced to struggle. But the streets were not soothed for long. The era was restless. Political promises cracked like cheap plaster. Ghetto youths saw leaders speak peace into microphones while funding war in alleyways. Everyone knew the truth. Babylon was not an abstract concept. Babylon was the police van idling near the corner. Babylon was the landlord knocking for rent the tenant never had. Babylon was salary that kept a man alive just enough to keep working. So reggae became sharper. Lyrics began naming names. Songs turned into cross-examinations of society itself. and those who controlled society began to worry. The heptones sang harmonies that sounded like wisdom, spoken by elders who understood survival without losing grace. Their voices rose not with anger, but with clarity. They did not shout, they revealed. Their bass lines were heavy enough to anchor memory to emotion. Their rhythms were slow enough to allow the listener to feel every word. A heptones record was not just something to play. It was something to sit inside. They carried heartbreak, like philosophers. They sang about betrayal without bitterness, about longing without desperation, about endurance without boasting. They reminded the people that to be wounded and still gentle is a triumph of the spirit. Meanwhile, another current was moving underground, one that belonged to the deepest roots, Nyabengi. The drums did not follow European time signatures. They followed pulse. They followed ancestry. They followed the heartbeat of the earth itself. When elders gathered to chant, those drums called spirits of rebellion who never accepted defeat. In the hills, they beat patterns carried from East Africa long before slave ships scattered families into unknown lands. The chants did not need translation. You did not have to understand the words to understand the meaning. The meaning was, you are not from nowhere. You are not severed. You are not lost. Your blood remembers. These rhythms did not stay in the hills. They descended into the city, into the dance hall, into the studio. Drummers became historians. Vocalists became prophets. And when the chants reached the recording studio, the result was a sound that felt less like song and more like summoning. The radio could play it, but the radio could not explain it. As reggae gained power, Jamaica's internal tensions became more visible to the world. The island was small, but the forces clashing on it were intense. The aftershock of colonialism, the hunger of capitalism, the rising awareness of African identity, the religious reawakening of Rastafari, and the urgency of youth who refused to inherit silence. Factions formed. Foreign powers played invisible chess with local lives. The dancehall was celebration and battlefield at the same time. Sugar Minot emerged in this atmosphere with a voice that carried discipline. His lyrics reminded the youth that freedom was not an accident. It required steady faith, not blind faith, tested faith. His songs did not speak of ease. They spoke of perseverance. He sang to people who were tired but refused to give up, and they heard him because he sounded like them. His message stayed inside the chest after the song ended. The children of Jamaican immigrants in London, Birmingham, Brixton, and Manchester grew into this music with a different urgency. They understood racism not as theory but daily weather. Their skin was statement. Their accent was accusation. Their music was shield and sword. When two teenage girls in the UK stepped into the spotlight with a DJ tune that did not care about politeness, the world saw something it was not prepared to acknowledge. Young black women who understood their power and exercised it without apology. Their song climbed the British charts not because the industry wanted to open doors, but because the streets pried the doors open with force. Their success was evidence that culture does not ask for permission when it is ready to move. And as reggae crossed the ocean into Europe and Africa, it arrived not as foreign sound, but as familiar message. In Lagos, in Accra, in Nairobi, people heard themselves in the struggle. Colonization had touched many lands. Exploitation had many faces. But reggae spoke a shared language: dignity. When Bob Marley appeared in Zimbabwe during its independence celebration, the crowd did not treat him as outsider. They received him as brother, because the music had already arrived before he did. The rhythms had traveled across airwaves and pirate tapes and sound system speakers, preparing the ground for the messenger before the messenger's feet touched the soil. But the messages of reggae were not always embraced by those in power. Government officials understood that rhythm could move bodies, but message could move nations. The music was monitored. Concerts were infiltrated. Songs were banned, but banning only confirmed importance. When you forbid a sound, you prove it carries truth. The dub engineers found new ways to smuggle that truth. They stripped vocals out, stretched echoes, lengthened bass lines, and hid meaning inside reverb chambers. Dub was not emptiness. It was unspoken continuation. It said, even when they remove the words, the message remains. The people had learned how to listen beneath the surface. And there was prophecy in the music, not metaphor, prophecy. There were songs that spoke of days of fire, of reckoning, of Babylon trembling. Some of those days came. Streets erupted. The old order cracked. Some blamed the music, but the music had only described what was already happening, what had always been happening, what history tries to bury until the ground refuses silence. Meanwhile, global audiences began romanticizing reggae. They came for the surface. The rhythm, the cannabis imagery, the colors red, gold, green, the relaxed sway. But those who stopped at the surface misunderstood the point. Reggae was not vacation music. Reggae was survival testimony. To listen lightly was to miss the weight. Even love songs carried history. When lovers swayed to Dennis Brown or Gregory Isaacs, they were not escaping reality. They were asserting humanity in a world that tried to reduce them to labor, to statistics, to stereotypes. To love under oppression is an act of rebellion. The revolution was not only on stage, it was in every household where a mother hummed songs while boiling rice. That was never enough for everyone. It was in every taxi driver who played Marley instead of obeying silent resentment. It was in every youth who wore dreadlocks, knowing it invited police attention. The culture moved through ordinary bodies. That was its true power. Bob Marley became symbol because he allowed himself to be vessel. He did not sing to entertain crowds. He sang because the message weighed heavy inside him and had to come out. His music was scripture spoken aloud. His concerts were revivals. Augustus Pablo kept building the mystical wing of the house. Dennis Brown kept singing for the heart. Sugar Minott kept strengthening the faith. The Heptones kept guarding the emotional archive. The UK youths kept proving inheritance is not bound by geography. And Marley kept opening the gates. But revolutions are not clean. They are not tidy. They are not neatly concluded. They leave questions. They leave echoes. They leave unfinished sentences. And that is where it stops. Tell me which part of this hidden history surprised you the most. Let me know if you were aware of the political power of reggae music. Share your thoughts on music as a tool for revolution in the comments. I am reading all your comments. Follow for more untold stories they tried to bury